Hello and welcome to Nature and Environment. And today I'm going to look at why science is working in other areas, countries, regions, and why science is not working in other jurisdictions during a disease outbreak. In this presentation, I'll make a huge reference to the Ebola virus disease in Liberia and cite a few COVID-related examples. In this presentation, I'll look at 5 major areas. I'll look at the background of Ebola virus disease. I'll look at transportation in Liberia. I'll look at the healthcare system. I'll look at public places, and I'll also look at customs, culture, and religion. So somebody will ask, what is science? What is science about? I think science is an organized or a systematic study about structures, the characters, and their relationship of the physical and the natural world using the sensory organs. Or somebody would say based on observations and experiment. They mean the same thing. Okay, so now my point here is, how do we then apply science when it comes to a disease outbreak? So there are so many ways by which science is being applied when it comes to the containment of disease. So one is isolation and quarantine. 2, development of vaccines and applications of vaccine. 3, physical distancing. 4, proper use of personal protection equipment, among others. So now let's look at what we mean by Ebola. Let's touch a bit on Ebola. So Ebola, the first appearance occurred in 2 different countries simultaneously, in Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo in 1976. In Democratic Republic of Congo, it occurred in a small village near the Ebola River. Hence, the virus was named after the river, the Ebola River. Now, there have been a number of occurrences of it in Africa, but I would center my discussion on the one that took place in West Africa, and particularly Liberia. Why? Okay, so I'm interested in talking about Liberia because I was there from the beginning of the virus till the time Liberia was declared Ebola-free nation or country. So let's look at how the virus is being passed to human population. So the virus is introduced into human population by close contact with blood, secretion, organs, body fluids of infected animals such as gorillas, chimpanzee, bats, antelope, porcupines, found ill, dead, or in the tropical forest. So this should give you an indication that the whole issue about Ebola is associated with countries that host the tropical forest in Africa. Okay. Now, the next point I want to look at is the transportation system. So we'll look at these 2 extreme cases. So between 2014 to 2016, in Liberia, most of the commuters, the workers, they use the public bus to get to the workplace and then go back. So if you would realize how the whole system is, for instance, they have limited buses. So what happened is that if the bus is, for instance, supposed to take say 60 people, you may end up with about 120 people on the bus. So I'll give you a practical example. Those who know Liberia very well would get me right. So starting from, say, red light, it goes through Jacobstown, Barnabé, New Georgia, Iron Factory, Battery Factory, Freeport, Claratown, and all the way to Intown. You realize that the buses will be fully loaded in the morning. The same thing happens in the evening. Now, the point we want to make here, if somebody is infected with the virus and then the person gets on the bus, right, all the people on the bus will be affected. And it becomes very difficult. Now, let's look at the other side. In the developed countries, what happens is that they have a lot of buses here. So I'll give you a typical example. During COVID, how were they able to respond to, the COVID situation? Could you imagine a whole bus that could take about, say, 30 people? The numbers were cut down to only 9 people. And it was working perfectly, simply because there are other social programs that are in place, unlike the developing part, particularly Liberia. So let's look at it. In the developed world, for instance, people don't make money, or they don't survive on the money that they make on daily basis, right? At least they have, they are able to pay it well, and people are able to save money, and then they can count on their monies in the bank anytime they want to do that. We also have something like, say, other structures or other social programs, like the food stamps, and then that of the food bank. So in Canada, we say the food bank, and then if you find yourself in, say, in the United States, they say the food stamp. So if you ask somebody, okay, don't go to work today, right, but you can have access to food, definitely you will see that people will stay home. So in Canada, there are other places where you can go there with your ID cards and all that, and then you can go get food from the food bank if you have run out of money. So in COVID time, it doesn't matter whether you are working or you're not working, whether you're working or you're not working. You could just go there and then get access to, food for a couple of weeks. But in Africa, if you tell somebody, okay, stay home, because if you get on the bus or if you get into any of this, transport mode, you end up spreading this the virus. It will be very difficult, because if they don't move out to go and make money, there's no way they are going to survive for the day. So if you look at the two very well, you realize that now, if we are able to apply the science to be able to reduce or contain a virus of this sort, then it becomes very difficult. The same thing also applies in the case of the taxi transportation. Prior to the virus in Liberia, the taxi would take 7 people, including the driver. So if somebody gets on board, right, and then the person gets into the taxi, what happens is that you may come into contact with the person here and there, and as you come into contact with the person here and there, you may also end up contracting the virus, and that will also end up spreading the virus. Now, the next thing I want to look at is public places. Now, in Liberia, the electronic banking is not effective, and a few people are able to, do that on, from their home. So what happens is that when they pay, when it's time for people to take their money at the end of the month, you will see queue of people in the banks trying to collect their money. It's almost something that cuts across every part of Liberia, which is so unique. So you go to downtown Monrovia, all the banks, you see people lining up to take their money. Now, again, if somebody has the virus, what will happen is that the person can spread the virus easily. Now, let's look at what happens on the extreme end, that is in the developed part, like, in the western part of the world. Now, most of the people are able to do banking from their fingertips, either from their phone, from their laptops and all that. So during a disease outbreak, and then you ask people to stay home, they are not supposed to go to the bank and all that, it works perfectly, because they can do all transactions while sitting home. Now, if you go to the bank in the western part of the world, it will surprise you the maximum number of people you will see in a bank, maybe about 10 people. at a go. And usually they are the elderly people who are not very familiar with the use of what technology, and then you see them over there. So now if you apply science and by saying that no, they have to be in isolation, or they have to stay home, they are not supposed to come into contact with people, you realize that they will be able to what adjust, and the science will work effectively, unlike the developing part of the world. Now let's look at another place I want to talk about. The market is also another big place here. So this market issue is something that cuts across every part of Africa. It's every part. When you go to the marketplace, what we have over there, we have tables that have been mounted all over there, and the food items are spread on the table. So if you want to get some of these items, all that you have to do is that you pick it, you figure it here and there, you toss it, you flip it over, and then you see whether it's in good condition. After that, you do the bargaining business with the seller, and then once you reach on a common point, you pay, and then you go. If you don't want it, you move to the next table, you do the same thing, you play with the stuffs here and there, and then you turn it around, and then so in case somebody or one of these buyers or customers comes to the market, and then that person is infected with the virus, and then the person gets in there and start to be tossing tomatoes around, trying to see the condition of this tomato before purchasing it, then we are ending up spreading the virus, because a number of people will do the same thing, and the market is crowded, so you definitely run into people. So the sweat of people, right, can even end up in this one, right? People, they talk here and there. It's a big place, it's a big marketplace, right? So all the market you see. So in this case, now let's look at the case of Liberia. Sunday is a big market day, and it's wonderful, right? People are doing shopping in the morning, they want to cook the best of food, and it happens on Sunday. So now, again, if you apply the science here, it doesn't work, or it may take time to work. Another area that I want to touch on is the health system. The health system is also a case that cuts across every part of the developing world, and particularly Africa. Okay, so now, in most cases, when we do have an outbreak, right, we have not prepared to be able to respond to the condition. So it takes us some time to be able to adjust to the situation. Now we bring in the science, or we transfer the science to help with the situation. Now, for instance, if you are talking about, say, Ebola, now what happened is that the people have to be educated. Not only the people, but the frontline workers, I mean the health workers, they also have to be trained. So once you're already into the outbreak, you are spending like 1 month to be able to train these people, and now they will not be in a position to grab all the concepts. So what happened is that they will leave them somehow not 100% sure of what the facilities and the public education and all that. So it will also take them some time to be able to pass this information on to the masses. So at the end of the day, we are going to have a lot of gaps in between here, and that is what is making the science difficult here. And it will also surprise you to know that the PPEs and all that, they are not even the health workers are still adjusting to adopt to the new concept. At the same time, they are passing this message on to the masses. So it becomes somehow difficult for the people to do that. But not everybody has access to television and all that. So you cannot just be home and then you have access to all the things that are being taught or are being, educated on the television, so that you could quickly adjust to the situation. Now let's look at another area. In the Western world, they have prepared very, wonderfully. And what happened is that they can even provide remote health services. You call the doctor on the phone, and then you are getting your service. Now, the technology is they are all the time adopting to new technology. So they are quickly, the health workers are easily adjusted to new situation without much problem. Right. So when there's an outbreak, switching from the normal pattern or the normal behavior to the new trend, they are able to cope without much difficulties, unlike the other part of the world. There's one thing I also want to talk about. The last thing I want to talk about, that is the customs, the culture, and religion. These three, most of the time, pose a great challenge to science. Okay, so now let's look at culture. You see, we still have the idea and the mentality that, okay, so for instance, okay, I'll use Ebola. So Ebola, in the case of Ebola, they said, okay, if you eat monkeys and bats, you may end up what? Contracting the virus. Now, it will surprise you to know that somebody will tell you, no, this is not something new. Our great grandfathers, they ate bats about 100 years, about 50 years ago, and they stayed long. They stayed to 80 years and all that. So we are not going to stop. But there's one thing that we all have to be aware that their kind of environment that they used to live is not the same environment as we are now. Those days, most of them were hunters and gatherers, right? About 200 years ago. So what happened is that they knew nothing about pollution, they knew nothing about chemicals and all that, and they had a good time, right? Fresh environment, fresh air, and they were healthy. But today, we have tried. We are the biggest transformers or changes. We have tried to modify the environment in a way for us to be comfortable. So in doing this, we also end up producing a lot of chemicals into the environment, ending up with what? Pollution, health deficiencies, among others. So if you will still stick to your culture and say, hey, you are not going to adopt the science of today, but you will still stick to the old stuff, then you're going to end up in problem. You may be the first person to be buried. I'll also talk about one thing, that is the customs. Now, you realize in Liberia in particular, and in Africa as a whole, we love to eat in groups. So, you may see 5 people, 10 people, or 8 people eating from a common bowl. It has been something that we have been living with this for very long. And, breaking away from this old habit becomes very hard. But when there's an outbreak, people will still stick to this kind of tradition and say, oh, nothing will happen. But sharing spoon, sharing, basic stuff, with somebody who is infected with the virus, you may end up also contracting the virus, and then you end it for spreading it all around to your families, to your friends, and people who you don't even know. So that is also one thing. But in the developed world, you hardly see people eating from a common bowl. So in case of outbreak of this sort, the science works because I don't have any contact with you. And now the spoons that they use in the hotels and all that, it's surprising how they do it. They can heat it to a certain temperature so that, they're able to neutralize or sterilize any infection that is associated or, comes into contact with any of these stuffs. And they do it wonderfully. You wouldn't believe that. But that is the reality. Now let's look at the aspect of religion. Now, religion is all the time also conflicting with science, but I think we should separate them we should put them in separate folds. Why? It is good to be prayerful, it is good to pray, but you don't conflate religion with that of what? Science. So now they are telling you, do social distancing, keep away from others, walk, avoid people, don't come into contact with people, do away with large numbers so that what you stay healthy. It is good you go to church and all that, but in an outbreak, when you are advised by the science, the virus is gone, you can go back to church. I think it's a good piece of advice. If you continue to persist, I wouldn't mind, I will go against what they are saying and continue to do my religious. It doesn't matter whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, whether you are whatever religion or faith you belong to. If you are not careful and then you go against these scientific procedures, what will happen is that if you are not careful, you may be the first person to join your ancestors. So putting all these things together, so now let me look at the extreme end. But the extreme end, what happened is that the people they really appreciate how the education goes. When they say you don't go to church, you stay in your house. So what we have to do is that in the developed world, I would advise that they don't have to all the time just transfer the science and impose it on the masses over there. But we have to look at their very condition and see how we can fit in the science in some way. But the basic things that needs to be done, the government of the developing countries will have to make some of these things readily available. The basic amenities, the basic facilities should be readily available. They should have enough transportation to be able to move people here and there. So if you say that, for instance, you want to reduce the number of people who want to go to town or who want to go to the central part of the business area, you can still reduce the number, but at the end of the day, they'll be able to get there and then come back. Now, we need to have social programs that will support people who are not working and people who are definitely and hardly, relying on daily livelihood. So if we have people of this sort and then you tell them, hey, look, don't go to work because there's a spread or there's an outbreak of water disease, there's no way that person will listen to you. But if we can put in place some of these structures so that in case of emergency, they can just, go there and then make, get a few stuff to survive, I think we'll be able to respond to most of these virus-related cases. Again, we also have to try and build up the health system in terms of the personnel, in terms of what facilities and all that. We shouldn't wait for, say, the virus. We shouldn't wait for an illness to hit us, to hit the whole country. We start to put in place, the structures and trying to see whether we'll be able to prevent it, because it will take you by surprise. And before you finish with even building a whole or a complex structure to be able to respond to any of these virus, majority of the masses would be gone. So at this point, I want to say thank you for listening. Do share my page, like my page, leave your comments, and follow. Bye for now.